The Galactic Council met in the Grand Amphitheater of Xylos Prime, a place built from living crystal that hummed softly with every word spoken inside it. Over 200 species filled the tiered seats, their forms as varied as the stars they came. From some floated in shimmering bubbles, others sat wrapped in armored shells, and a few communicated only through pulses of colored light. At the center of it all stood Daniel Reeves, the human ambassador. He wore a simple gray suit. No medals, no symbols, just the quiet dignity Earth had always tried to show. The air was thick with tension even before he spoke for weeks. Rumors had swirled through the corridors of power, whispers that humanity was pulling back from joint operations, that their ships were vanishing from patrol routes, that their scientists had stopped sharing data. No one knew why, and that made the Council nervous. Humans had only joined the galactic community 70 years ago. But in that time, they had become essential. Their engineers fixed warp conduits, no one else understood. Their doctors healed diseases, thought incurable. And their diplomats always seemed willing to listen, even when others shouted. High Speaker Lyra Vaughn of the Cathari rose from her elevated perch, her silver robes flowing like liquid moonlight. She was old even by her species standards, and her voice carried the weight of centuries. Daniel Reeves, you are summoned to explain the sudden withdrawal of human personnel from the Helios Minor relief effort and the silence from your delegation on Cygnus 9. She said, her tone calm but edged with warning. Reeves did not bow. He did not smile. He simply looked at her, and then at the sea of alien faces watching him. Some curious, some angry, some afraid. He took a slow breath and spoke in clear, simple English, effective. Immediately, the United Earth government severs all diplomatic ties with the Galactic Council. This includes trade agreements, mutual defense, pacts, scientific collaborations, and cultural exchanges. All human personnel will be recalled within 72 hours. All data links to the Galactic Concord network will be terminated. All embassies closed. A wave of shock rolled through the chamber. Voices erupted in dozens of languages, some sharp, some confused, some furious. A Velnari delegate slammed a three-fingered fist on his console. What is the meaning of this insult? Reeves remained still. He did not raise his voice. He did not flinch. You have your answer? He said. Lyra Vaughn raised a hand, and silence fell again, though it trembled at the edges. Why, she asked softly, why now? After all we have built together? That is not for me to say, Reeves replied. And with that, he turned and walked away, his boots clicking softly. Against the crystal floor, the sound echoed louder than any shout back on Earth. President Elena Dawson stood in the war room beneath the rocky hills of Colorado. The lights were dim, the screens dark except for one showing the live feed from Xylos Prime. She watched as Reeves disappeared through the arched exit. Then she turned to her advisors. No one spoke. They all knew what came next. She walked to the central console and placed her palm on the biometric scanner. A soft chime sounded. Executive. Order 77, she said clearly, and the system confirmed her voice print with a green pulse. She pressed the final button, across the solar system. Alarm sounded in human outposts on Mars, on Titan. In the rings of Saturn, automated systems began, shutting down external communications. Cargo ships powered down their transponders, and military vessels locked their weapon systems on standby. All non-essential personnel received the same message: return to Sol Sector immediately. On the moon base, Artemis Commander Ryan Cole stared at the order for a long moment, then nodded to his crew. Begin evacuation protocol Alpha. He said, his voice steady, but his hands were clenched. Meanwhile, on the edge of Council space, near the nebula of Velix, a human freighter named the Bright Star received the recall order. Captain Mia Foster read the message twice, then erased it from the log. She turned to her co-pilot. You heard it? Jake, pack it up. We are going home. Jake frowned, but didn't argue. He had seen the news feeds too. The Council was already calling it the Great Silence, and fear was spreading faster than light back in the amphitheater. The Council remained in chaos. Lyra Vaughn called for emergency session after emergency session, but no one had answers. The humans had vanished like smoke and left behind only questions. Some delegates demanded military action. Send a fleet to Sol, force them to talk. Others warned against it. Humans may seem peaceful, but their history was soaked in war, and their technology had advanced at a frightening pace in just a few decades. A young aide from the Zenthari delegation whispered to her superior, "Do you think they found something?" Her superior did not answer, but his eyes flickered toward the starson, Earth. The skies were clear over Washington, D.C. as dusk settled. President Dawson stepped outside the bunker and looked up at the first stars appearing in the violet sky. She thought of Daniel Reeves walking alone through that alien hall. She thought of the thousands of humans coming home from across the galaxy. And she thought of the thing they had found out there in the dark. The thing no one in the council had ever mentioned. She did not know what would happen next, but she knew one thing: they could not pretend anymore. The council could rage, they could beg, they could threaten, but Earth had made its choice. And for the first time in 70 years, humanity would face the future on its own terms. The stars watched silently as the last human ship left orbit around Xylos Prime, its engines flaring bright against the endless night, and somewhere far beyond the edge of known space, something ancient stirred in its sleep, sensing the change in the song of the cosmos. Silence spread through the galaxy like a cold tide where once human voices filled comm channels. Now there was only static. Where human ships once sailed trade lanes now lay empty and still on a dozen worlds. Machines built with human hands began to fail, and no one knew how to fix them on Helios Minor. The sky turned a sickly yellow as the atmospheric stabilizer sputtered and died. The device had been installed 5 years earlier by a team of human engineers led by Marcus Bell. It kept the air breathable for the native Kalari, who had no lungs capable of filtering the planet's natural toxins now without it. They choked in their own cities. A Kalari elder stood at the edge of the stabilizer platform, his thin limbs trembling. He remembered Marcus Bell, a quiet man with kind eyes who stayed late every night to check the readings, who taught Kalari children how to read the dials, who refused payment saying it was enough to help. Now the platform was empty. The humans gone, and the Kalari had no idea how to restart the machine. They tried everything, even smashing the control panel in desperation, but nothing worked. On the mining colony of Viridia, human-designed quantum regulators kept the fusion cores from overheating. When the last human technician left, the regulators began to drift out of sync. Alarms blared for 3 days. Then the cores shut down, plunging the entire colony into darkness. Food synthesizers stopped. Water purifiers failed, and riots broke out in the lower tunnels. The Viridian Council sent frantic messages to the Galactic Council, but received only vague reassurances help is coming. They said, but no ships arrived, no engineers, no spare parts. Meanwhile, on the medical station orbiting Cygnus, 9,000s of patients waited for treatments that would never come. Human nanites had been the only cure for the gray fever, a disease that turned blood to sludge within hours. Without the nanites, the station became a tomb floating in space. Dr. Nora Lee, a human who had worked there for 12 years, boarded the last shuttle out. She looked back once at the station, its lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. She did not cry. She had cried enough in private. Back on Earth, the silence was different. It was not empty, but full of purpose. Every city, every lab, every shipyard hummed with activity. Humans were coming home, and with them came knowledge, data, and urgency. President Elena Dawson held daily briefings not in the grand halls of government, but in small, secure rooms with scientists, engineers, and pilots. They spoke in low voices about signals from deep space, about patterns in ancient star maps, about gaps in galactic history that no one had questioned before. On Mars, the old United Earth Observatory had been reactivated, its massive dishes now pointed not at known systems, but at the void beyond the Oort cloud where something waited. Dr. Olivia Grant sat in a dimly lit chamber surrounded by screens covered in symbols. No one understood. She had been pulled from her post on Proxima B the moment the signal was detected. Now she spent her days tracing the shapes of the unknown language, trying to find meaning in the rhythm of its pulses. She had not slept in 36 hours, but her eyes were sharp. She believed the signal was not a message, but a warning, and that belief chilled her more than any alien weapon ever could. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council scrambled to fill the void left by humanity. They formed emergency task forces. They reallocated resources. They even tried to reverse engineer human tech, but it was useless. Human systems were built with layers of intuitive logic that no other species could replicate. The Velnari attempted to copy a human translation matrix, but Their version kept producing nonsense phrases like "sky eats time" or "silence has teeth." The Ketheri sent a delegation to the abandoned human embassy on Xylos Prime, hoping to find logs or notes, anything that might explain the sudden withdrawal. But the building was completely empty. Not a single data chip left behind, just clean white walls and the faint smell of coffee. High Speaker Lyra Vaughn grew more frustrated with each passing day. She had always believed in diplomacy and dialogue, in the slow, careful work of building trust. But now that trust had been shattered and she did not know how to rebuild it, she called Daniel Reeves a traitor in private but in public. She urged restraint. "We must understand," she told the council, "before we act." But understanding was hard to find. On the frontier world of Tarsus, a young human pilot named Caleb Ruiz landed his scout ship in the middle of a dust storm. He was not supposed to be there. The recall order had been clear, but he had stayed behind to help a group of refugees cross the desert. When he finally lifted off again, his ship low on fuel and his comms silent, he looked at the stars and wondered if Earth even remembered him. He did not know it yet, but his name would soon be added to a list of missing persons. The council would use his case as proof that humans were abandoning their own. But Caleb was not abandoned. He was choosing. He flew toward the outer rim, not to hide but to watch. Because out there, beyond the reach of council sensors, something was changing. Stars that had burned steady for millennia now flickered in strange sequences. Planets shifted orbits in ways that defied gravity, and deep space probes sent back images of structures that should not exist. The galaxy was waking up, and humanity had walked away just in time. On Earth, the evacuation was nearly complete. The last transports from Titan had docked, the final research teams from Europa were debriefed, and the orbital defense grid had been fully reactivated in a quiet suburb of Chicago. A retired engineer named Frank Mills sat on his porch watching the sunset. He had spent 40 years building warp drives for the Joint Fleet. Now he fixed bicycles for neighborhood kids and smiled more than he had in years. Did not know about the signal or the megastructure or the secrets buried in galactic archives, but he felt the change in the air like a shift in the wind. Something big was coming, and for the first time in a long time, humans were ready to face it. Alone. The council still talked, still argued, still demanded answers, but their voices grew quieter with each passing day because the truth was sinking. Inhumanity was not coming back, and the galaxy would never be the same. Deep in the outer reaches of the solar system, beyond the last flicker of sunlight, a lone research vessel named the Horizon drifted in silence, its hull scarred by micrometeorites, and time. Dr. Olivia Grant floated near the main viewport, her eyes fixed on the shape that hung in the void ahead. It was massive, larger than any known station or ship. A ring of black metal wrapped around a core that pulsed with faint blue light. It had no engines, no windows, no markings, just smooth surfaces that seemed to drink the starlight around them. They had found it 3 months ago during a routine survey of the Oort cloud. At first they thought it was debris from an ancient war, but the scans told a different story. The structure was not broken, it was waiting. Olivia had spent every waking hour since then studying the signal it sent. Not with sound, but with gravity. Ripples, tiny distortions in space-time that repeated in a pattern too precise to be natural. She had tried every translation algorithm, every linguistic model, even ancient Earth ciphers. But nothing fit until she stopped looking for words and started listening for rhythm. That was when she realized it was not a message. It was a warning. The pattern matched records from human deep space probes that had vanished decades ago. It matched anomalies in Ketheri star charts that had been quietly erased. It matched fragments of Velnari myth that spoke of silent watchers in the dark. She brought her findings to President Dawson in a sealed briefing room with no windows and no network connection. Just 2 women and a truth too dangerous to share. Every species in the Galactic Council, she said, her voice low but steady, has records of this thing or something like it. But all of them altered the data, all of them buried. Dawson stared at the hologram of the structure rotating slowly above the table. Why, she asked. Because they were afraid. Olivia replied, and fear makes liars of everyone. That night the president authorized Project Sentinel, a secret initiative to study the megastructure without outside interference. No council oversight, no shared data, no compromises. Earth would face this alone. not out of pride but because trust had been broken long before humans ever knew it existed. On Mars, scientists worked in shifts inside shielded labs analyzing fragments of the signal. They discovered something even more troubling. The structure was not just broadcasting. It was listening, and it responded to certain frequencies with subtle shifts in its energy field. One young technician named Jason Cole noticed that when they played a recording of Earth's oldest known song, a simple melody hummed by Neolithic tribes, the structure's pulse slowed as if in recognition. They tried other sounds, whale calls whined through redwood trees, a child's laughter each time the response changed slightly. Not hostile, not friendly. Just aware. Meanwhile on Earth, historians scoured every archive they could find human, and otherwise they compared creation myths from 100 worlds and found a common thread. A time before time when the stars went quiet, and the sky watchers disappeared. The Ketheri called it the Great Forgetting. The Velnari called it the Silence between breaths, but humans had no name for it because their history was too short, too new. Until now, in a hidden bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains of Wyoming, a team of engineers led by engineer Maria Lopez worked to build a new kind of probe, one that did not rely on council-approved tech but on human intuition. Human mistakes, human hope, they called it the Messenger, and it carried no weapons, no demands, just a single question encoded in light and sound. Are we alone in remembering? Back on the horizon. Olivia sat alone in the observation deck. The rest of the crew slept in shifts, but she could not rest. She kept replaying the moment she understood the truth. It was not that the council had lied to humans. It was that they had lied to everyone, including themselves. They had built a galaxy of peace and progress on a foundation of denial, and humanity had been the first to notice the cracks. She thought of Daniel Reeves walking out of that council chamber, not in anger but in sorrow, because he knew what she now knew. The galaxy was not ready for the truth, but Earth had to be on the surface of Titan. A former human mining outpost, now abandoned, a single camera still functioned, powered by a geothermal tap. It recorded the sky every hour and sent the data back to Earth in encrypted bursts. One night, it captured something strange. A cluster of stars that should have been fixed in place had shifted position by a fraction of a degree. Astronomers compared it to ancient human star maps and found the same shift had happened 70,000 years ago, right before the last ice age. The timing was not a coincidence. The structure was not just watching. It was marking time, and time was running out. In Washington, D.C., President Dawson met with the heads of the Global Defense Council. They spoke of shields, of fleets, of evacuation plans. But she stopped them. We are not preparing for war, she said. We are preparing for truth. That night, she authorized the final phase of Project Sentinel. The messenger would be launched in 7 days, and every human would be told what they faced, not through broadcasts or orders, but through schools, through art, through stories, so that when the silence broke, everyone would be ready, on the edge of the Kuiper Belt. A small ship named the Wanderer, piloted by a retired teacher named Helen Cruz, carried the last group of off-world civilians back to Earth. She had volunteered for the mission, not for pay, but because she believed every child deserved to come home before the storm. As she passed Neptune, she looked at the stars and whispered a promise we will not forget again. Deep in the void, the megastructure pulsed, once slow and deep like a heartbeat, and somewhere far beyond it, something else answered. The Galactic Council was unraveling without human hands to hold it together. Systems failed faster than anyone could repair them. On the trade hub of Horus 9, a human-designed regulator in the main power grid overheated and melted down, taking the entire station offline for weeks. Food rotted in storage, medical supplies spoiled, and riots turned into fires that burned for days, with no one able to restore order. High Speaker Lyra Vaughn watched the reports pile up on her console. Her face tight with frustration, she had sent message after message to Earth, but all were blocked by an energy barrier that now surrounded the entire Sol system. No signal got in. No ship got out. Not even the fastest Kethari scouts could breach it. Desperate, she called a secret meeting with the Velnari Spymaster Corps and the Zenthari Fleet Commander Tael. They met in a shielded chamber beneath the Council archives where no recording devices were allowed. We cannot wait any longer, Corps said, his voice like dry leaves scraping stone. The humans know something, they are hiding it. And if we do not act, we will be left blind when whatever they fear arrives. Il nodded, his armored fingers tapping the table. They have always been too curious, too bold. Now they vanish without warning. This is not peace, this is preparation. Lyra. Vaughn closed her eyes for a long moment, then opened them. We will send a team, she said. Not a fleet, not a demand, just eyes and ears to Mars. The old United Earth outpost there may still hold answers. And so they chose 7 operatives from species known for stealth and silence. They gave them no weapons, only sensors and cloaking gear and a single order. Find out why Earth walked away. The team slipped through the outer edges of the solar system in a ship coated with light-bending alloy. They avoided the main patrols and drifted toward Mars like dust on the solar wind. They landed near the ruins of the Artemis base where human footprints still marked the red soil. The place was empty but not abandoned. Everything had been neatly stored, power cells disconnected, data drives removed. Even the chairs were stacked in corners. They searched for days, finding nothing until one of them, a young Xanthari named Nis, noticed a faint heat signature beneath the main command room. They dug through layers of regolith and found a sealed hatch. Inside was a small chamber with 1 chair, 1 screen, and a single active terminal. As Nis approached, the screen flickered to life and President Elena Dawson appeared not as a live feed but as a recorded hologram. She looked tired but calm. If you are seeing this, she began. Then the council has not changed. You knew what was out there. You chose to hide it from everyone, even yourselves. You erased your own history to feel safe. She paused and her eyes seemed to look straight at them. We choose to walk away, not because we hate you, but because we refuse to live in a lie. The hologram ended and the screen went dark. The team stood in silence for a long time, then Kor spoke softly. We were warned back on Xylos Prime, Lyra. Vaughn received the report. She read it 3 times, then sat very still. The truth settled in her chest like a stone. They had known. All of them. The Cathari archives held records of skywatchers who vanished in the age of first fire. The Velnari had songs about the silent ones who came before stars. The Xanthari had temple carvings of ringed giants that drifted between galaxies. But they had called them myths, legends, stories for children, never truth. Now Earth had faced that truth and chosen honesty over comfort. Lyra Vaughn called an emergency session of the full council. Not to demand answers, but to confess. We have been lying to ourselves, she said, her voice trembling. Not with anger, but with shame. For generations we have ignored the signs because we were afraid to remember. The chamber was silent. No one shouted, no one argued. They all knew she was right. On Earth, the energy barrier remained, but inside the solar system life went on. Schools taught children about the megastructure not as a threat, but as a mystery to be understood. Farms grew food under artificial suns, and engineers built new ships not for war but for exploration. President Dawson stood on the observation deck of the Lunar Command Center watching the launch of the messenger probe. It rose on a column of fire toward the outer dark, carrying with it humanity's question, not in council code or diplomatic phrasing, but in the raw, unfiltered voice of a species that had finally learned to trust itself. In the Galactic Council chamber, Lyra Vaughn removed her silver robes and laid them on the speaker's podium. I will not lead a galaxy built on silence, she said, and walked out alone in Mars. The hatch beneath the Artemis base sealed itself forever, and in the void between stars the megastructure pulsed once in response to the messenger's approach. Not with fear, not with anger, but with something close to hope. The council watched from afar, unable to act, unwilling to lie anymore, and for the first time in 10,000 years the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what truth would do next. Months passed and the galaxy learned to live in a world without humans. The trade lanes stayed quiet. The council meetings grew shorter and quieter, and the stars seemed farther away than before, but Earth was not idle. In the silence they worked, not with fear but with purpose. The messenger probe sailed beyond the Oort cloud, its path steady. Its message clear, a simple archive of human knowledge, music, language, art, science, all carried in pulses of light and sound. Not as a weapon, not as a plea, but as an offering. The bridge of the scout ship Wanderer, young pilot Caleb Ruiz adjusted his course toward a signal. No one else could see it, came from a small, uncharted system near the rim. A place the council had marked as empty, but his Sensors picked up faint energy readings and a repeating pattern that matched the rhythm of Earth's oldest lullabies. He did not know who was sending it, but he knew it was not human, and that was enough to go. He flew alone. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to be the first to say hello instead of demand answers. Back on Earth, cities glowed under artificial auroras, powered by clean fusion plants. Children played in parks grown from seeds brought back from Titan and in classrooms. They learned not just math and history, but how to listen to the silence between stars. Olivia Grant stood on the roof of the Mars Observatory, watching the sky. The megastructure had not moved, but it had changed. Its pulse now matched the frequency of human brain waves during deep thought. As if it were learning them, she smiled softly. They were not being watched. They were being studied, and that meant they were not alone. Meanwhile, on the edge of council space, a small delegation from the Grix arrived at the Soul Barrier. The Grix were not part of the council. They were wanderers, nomads who lived on generation ships and traded stories instead of goods. Their leader, a woman named Sarah with eyes like polished stone, sent a simple message, not in council code but in raw audio, a recording of her people singing to newborn stars. To everyone's surprise, the barrier flickered and opened just enough for her ship to pass through. She was met not by soldiers but by a teacher named Helen, Cruz, who offered her tea and asked what songs her people knew. Word spread quietly among the smaller species, those who had never held power in the council, but who remembered old tales of sky watchers and silent rings. They began sending messages. To Earth, not demands, not threats, just questions and sometimes just silence. The Galactic Council watched but did not interfere. High Speaker Lyra Vaughn had stepped down and no one had taken her place. The chamber sat empty most days, its crystal walls humming only with echoes. On Earth, President Elena Dawson walked through a garden grown from seeds collected across the solar system. She stopped by a patch of blue flowers that bloomed only under Mars soil and Earth sunlight, a symbol of something, new, something made from two worlds. She thought of Daniel Reeves, who now taught history to cadets at the academy. He told them not about wars or treaties, but about the moment humanity chose truth over comfort. In the outer dark, the messenger probe reached the megastructure. It did not dock. It did not transmit. It simply floated nearby and played a recording of a child laughing on a summer day on Earth. For 3 full cycles, the structure was still. Then it responded not with words, but with a single pulse that spread through space like ripples in a pond, and every species that had ever hidden the truth felt it in their bones. So, on Velnari homeworld, elders wept as forgotten memories surfaced in their dreams. On Cathari temples, ancient carvings began to glow with soft light, and on 100 forgotten worlds, people looked up and remembered they were not the first to walk among stars. Humanity did not return to the council. They did not need to. They had built something new. Not an empire, not an alliance, but a path open to anyone willing to walk it, with eyes wide open. Captain Mia Foster now led a fleet of civilian ships, not military, not traders, but explorers. They carried no weapons, only tools and open comms channels. Their mission was simple: find others who remembered and help them speak. On the bridge of the Wanderer, Caleb Ruiz finally reached the source of the signal. It was a small station built into an asteroid covered in vines and solar panels, and when he stepped out in his suit, a figure waved from an airlock, not human, not alien, but something in between, a child of two worlds raised on stories of Earth and songs of the void. "Welcome home," the child said through the comm. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt like he belonged back on Earth. The stars shone brighter than ever, not because they had changed, but because humanity had finally learned to see them as they were, not as they wished them to be. The Galactic Council remained silent, not out of anger, but out of respect. They had spent centuries building walls of protocol, and now they watched as humans built bridges of truth, and somewhere far beyond the edge of known space, the megastructure turned slowly toward the center of the galaxy. Not to judge, not to punish, but to witness. For the first time in 10,000 years, the song of the cosmos was whole again, and humanity was no longer just listening. They were singing too.